So you bought your first airsoft gun. Congrats, by the way. But you quickly realize it doesn't come with the battery. In fact, 90% of the airsoft guns offered on the market today do not come with one. So that leaves you with, what kind of batteries do I buy? What's going on, Mill Gang? It's your boy Boaz here, back at it again with another informative video. As you guys may have seen from the intro or the title of the video, we're going to be going all over airsoft batteries. And right in front of me, in this very incendiary, extremely volatile, flammable pile of stuff in front of me are a ton of different airsoft batteries. And we're going to be going over what to look for in an airsoft battery, what all these numbers and terminologies mean, and what battery is right for you. Before we get into the meat and potatoes of all the different varieties of batteries that are out there for airsoft, we're going to be going over some of the terminology and specifications of airsoft batteries just to help you as to what to look for when you're selecting your airsoft battery. The biggest thing to look out for is the voltage, okay? You can see that represented in airsoft very commonly, either with a 7.4 volt, 8.4 volt, 9.6, 11.1, you name it. Okay, the voltage basically explains the strength of the current of electricity that the battery can output. So the closest analogy that I've gotten from more scientifically inclined people that have tried to explain to me this in the past is like if you're to equate the electrical current like water coming out of a hose. The higher the voltage in this hose analogy is, the more pressure, the higher pressure the water is coming out of that hose. And basically the rule of thumb is the higher voltage you get tend to give you higher rates of fire. That's not always the case, but that's generally the rule of thumb. Next up is going to be the amperage of the battery. Usually on airsoft batteries, it gets represented in milliamp hours or mAh. So generally what the amperage of the battery will tell you is how much juice there is in the battery. So again, if you're talking about water analogy, I guess you would say, right, a bigger milliamp battery would be, I guess you could kind of equate it to like a 5-gallon jug, whereas a smaller amperage battery can be like a water bottle. Typically for me, a rule of thumb is if I'm going to be using a battery or a gun for just one day of just simple day play at an airsoft field, usually I try to stick around 900 to 1000 milliamp hours. Anything more will last me longer, anything less will generally, I might want to pack extra batteries if I do that. So milliamp hours or amperage just tells you how much juice that the battery can hold. The final component of an airsoft battery that I personally think is kind of understated in the airsoft community is going to be the discharge or current rating on the battery. You can find that by looking at usually a 2-digit number followed by the letter C. So that gives you the current discharge rating of your battery. And basically what that means is it tells you how fast a battery can deliver power to your gun. And you see that reflected by the gun's trigger response. If you want a gun that is very responsive with your trigger, definitely you might want to look into a higher discharge battery. After going over all the specs, you might be very tempted to Google the most strongest, powerful, portable battery that you can find for your airsoft gun. But I'm gonna stop you right there.
Stop it.
Do not do that, okay? You're probably gonna break your gun. Yeah, that's pretty much the only reason. Your gun might not be able to handle it because there are a lot of batteries or portable batteries that are being used in different hobbies. For example, the main thing is drones and RC vehicles, RC cars, RC planes. You might be tempted to go over to those websites and buy those batteries. I would not recommend doing that because those batteries are not formulated, they're not designed to work with airsoft guns. So I would highly recommend, if you are to pick up a battery, make sure to get it at an airsoft specific retailer that is selling you an airsoft specific battery. I'm gonna put all this flammable material off to the side over here. So just in case if it catches fire, I'll get like a second to beat Kevin out the door here of the studio. Oh, there it is, what I'm looking for. All right, let's talk about this little battery here. So this battery that you see in front of you is going to be the nickel cadmium battery. Now this is, I guess you would say, a piece of airsoft history just because they're not commonly used anymore. However, these were the first conventional batteries to be used for the very first AEGs on the airsoft market. I'm gonna go into the reasons as to why these aren't used anymore. So first of all, they're low discharge batteries. So obviously, compared to a lot of modern airsoft guns that run on these batteries, low rate of fire and very delayed trigger response. It doesn't really feel snappy or that good, to be honest. And it has a very low amperage. So this specific battery, which is actually pretty bulky for what it is 500 milliamp hours. So this is basically half of my rule of thumb of a recommended day use battery here. And it is rated at 7.2 volts pretty low voltage. Now, one of the biggest pitfalls of a nickel cadmium battery is that it is affected by something called cell charge memory. So with the nickel cadmium battery, you have to fully discharge it and then you have to fully recharge it. Now, if you run this battery at a half cycle where you only drain half of it and you charge it up, well, congrats. Now you've lost 50% of the amperage next time you use it. Players back in the day would have to, after they're done using this gun or their gun for their day of play, they have to take it home and buy special battery dischargers to completely kill the battery in order to completely recharge it. I'm very glad we never had to use these. Since we're done with this, done. All right, now we're gonna be talking about, where is it? Ah, there they are. Okay. So now we're moving on to the next type of battery. In front of me here is basically what I, more or less, or a lot of you guys would have grown up with, and they are still in use today. It exists in this weird limbo space between being antiquated and outdated, and I don't really know. The industry is weird this way, but these are nickel metal hydride batteries. So this is definitely a considerable improvement over the nickel cadmium batteries, as they are less affected by the cell memory effect, where you don't have to necessarily discharge a battery all the way and fill it back up. You can still charge this halfway through and be more or less affected. However, some of the downsides is, again, still fairly low discharge. So you're not gonna be able to get ultra high rate of fire or ultra fast trigger response on this on these batteries. It is a bottleneck, and a lot of them are more or less wired to Tamiya connectors, and that's gonna be a bottleneck. I'll explain in a bit. Okay, but generally this is when you start seeing larger cells. So these batteries are a bit bulkier than nickel cadmium, and however, in order to kind of work around that, they do come in a lot more sizes and shapes. So over here is an 8.4 volt nickel metal hydride battery that you get on a lot of basic airsoft guns. Personally, I've had one of these for a front wired M4, and surprisingly, it fits. Next up is probably the most common type. This is a nunchuck style 9.6 volt nickel metal hydride battery. This fits on a lot of stocks for rear wired M4, specifically in that bulky crane stock, in the full stocks of M16s. A lot of guns can fit this as a very versatile battery shape. And up last, you have a very specialized AK style battery, which fits in the dust cover, hence this big old stick shape battery. One of the biggest benefits of these from an industry standpoint is that these batteries were really cheap to make compared to the LiPo batteries that you see on the market, okay? However, it's not really the case anymore. Again, this is why we're in such a weird limbo space, because lithium production has decreased in cost significantly over the past 10 years, and it's starting to really match the costs of these cheaper nickel metal hydride batteries. Because back in the day, it was either you pay 20 bucks for one of these or 50 bucks for a LiPo, but now you see a lot of LiPo batteries kind of matching in price, which is why, again, these exist in a really weird spot, and I'm holding these like chopsticks for some reason. It's just the Asian in me. However, the biggest downside of these nickel metal hydride batteries is it caps and bottlenecks your performance, especially nowadays with a lot of extremely high performing airsoft guns. You're kind of gonna be at a downside for running one of these batteries. Now, if you are just using a factory, I would say an airsoft AEG that's running anywhere between $150 to about $200, these will still work perfectly for you. However, if you notice on a lot of beginner guns, you can still feel the lack of discharge from these batteries. So if at all, at any point, if you have an airsoft gun that is moderate in cost but shoots around 400 FPS, you plug one of these batteries in, you're gonna notice it's a little sluggy and a little sluggish, a little bit delayed in trigger response time, and that's again due to the part that these are pretty low discharge batteries. So we went over nickel cadmium and nickel metal hydride. Now we're gonna be talking about lithium polymer batteries, LiPo batteries. This is pretty much the gold standard of a lot of modernized airsoft guns today, because a lot of manufacturers out there are coming out with more internally beefed up guns. So I'm going to be talking about how to safely run a LiPo battery in your gun, or maybe give you guys a checklist on to see if your gun can handle one or not. With the LiPo battery, especially for the size, you're going to get a lot of amperage, okay? So they hold a lot of juice, especially for the small form factor. Next up, their discharge rating tends to be a lot higher than nickel metal hydride batteries. So if you want to maximize the performance or optimize the performance of your gun, going with the LiPo battery might be the way to go for you. And finally, you're able to stuff a lot of voltage into these batteries, which is why they're so popular to use nowadays on the airsoft field. However, you have to prepare your gun to be able to handle the power that a LiPo battery can give you. So not every single airsoft gun can handle that amount of power without breaking your gun. But I recommend the 7.4 volt LiPo battery a lot to a lot of newer players who want a little bit more performance out of their gun, because you don't really need to do that. So because the voltage is lower, this can safely be used in a lot of, I guess you would say, entry-level airsoft guns. So if you have any airsoft guns that shoot around that 400 FPS mark, cost anywhere between $150 to $200, okay, it comes with this little nunchuck battery and you're not really feeling it, you know, you're feeling a little underpowered, this is probably one of the easiest upgrades to make because your gun can safely handle it. In fact, I've used these batteries for at least 5 or 6 years straight. This is exclusively what I ran on because I didn't want to buy a MOSFET. So if you guys want to make a quick upgrade, again, a 7.4 volt battery is the way to go. Generally, these batteries tend to be really small, so it can fit into a lot of guns, a lot of tight spaces, and they're relatively very affordable. Aside from the 7.4 LiPo that I just showed you guys earlier, some of the most common models on the airsoft field as far as LiPos go are going to be the 11.1 1000 milliamp buffer tube LiPo, stick LiPo that you see here, and for all AK users, the 1100 to 1300 milliamp hour level 1 LiPo for AK specifically. Now, even though these batteries are really common to see, they generally tend to cause the most problems specifically with newer airsoft players, generally because they don't really understand or know, well, what kind of components or how to properly prepare their guns to handle the increased power of a LiPo battery. With that being said, how do you exactly prepare your gun to handle an 11.1 LiPo battery? Well, the first thing that we recommend is making sure that your gun has an electronic control unit, whether it is a MOSFET, an ETU, ECU, or a micro switch trigger unit. So all those three components there, whether it's the MOSFET, electronic trigger, or the micro switch, those basically act as a buffer or a shield that basically protects your gun from the increased power delivery of an 11.1 LiPo battery. Now, you can run your gun without any of those components and you will see an immediate increase in performance. However, beware, because what you don't see is that your gun is taking a lot more of a beating. Your gun is going through a lot of wear and tear, taking in this extra power that technically cannot handle. So eventually you will run into some either electrical or mechanical failures that you will have to deal with down the road. When I'm selecting an 11.1 LiPo battery, the first thing that I look at is going to be the discharge rating. Again, the 2-digit number with the letter C next to it, okay? And that again tells you how much power that the battery can send into the gun at once. And generally the most common discharge rating for airsoft is going to be 20C. So if you have a basic MOSFET or any kind of electronic control device in your gun and you just want a general bump in your performance, you're going to want to go with a 20C LiPo battery. That's usually the safest bet. But there are a lot of different discharge ratings for 11.1 LiPo batteries. Sometimes you'll see lower discharge batteries like 15C. Sometimes you'll see something higher. For example, this mini brick over here, this is a 900 milliamp 30C LiPo battery. This is something that we recommend for a lot of our high-end custom guns like our Typhoon line, our Storm line, our Cyclone line. Okay, so for this, generally you're gonna need a lot of higher quality or high-end parts because this discharges a lot more power than your typical 20C LiPo battery. So even if you were to have a MOSFET, I would generally not recommend it unless you are an experienced gun builder or if you have custom work done to the gun where the tech has specifically built your gun around using this kind of battery. I would generally stay away from it as it will eventually, again, lower the lifespan of your gun even if you do have a MOSFET unit installed. Other than the performance output of these 11.1 LiPo batteries, one of the biggest benefits of using a LiPo battery is going to be the form factor, because back in the day, using that crane style stock that you see in a lot of beginner airsoft guns, that was pretty much universal because all our batteries were pretty much limited to something like this. They're big. However, with the advent of LiPo batteries and them becoming easier and cheaper to manufacture, right, you get something like this, like the buffer tube LiPo, right? It doesn't fit in the stock anymore. It's meant to fit inside the buffer tube of your gun, which opens up a lot of cosmetic freedom for you as a player, which is sick. But it doesn't come in this little stick form, right? You can still get it in weird shapes like this Zion Arms little square thing that is meant to fit specifically in their battery compartment, okay? And you get like these mini bricks that can fit on different stock types or handguards, and you even get things like this PEC box battery over here that's meant to fit inside a PEC box. And of course, you still have your nunchuck and butterfly style batteries if you still want to rock it this way, but I don't know why you would, just saying. But again, the potential is out there to really free up the cosmetic potential of your gun by using a smaller and better form-fitting battery. With all the benefits of running a LiPo battery aside, what are some of the drawbacks? Well, one of the first biggest drawback is going to be the charge cell memory on these batteries, okay? Unlike the nickel metal hydride batteries, these suffer from the charge cell memory effect, and basically what that means is these cells basically deteriorate as you continue to use them, and eventually, the sad truth is they're gonna eventually die, okay? So that's one of the biggest drawbacks of a LiPo battery. The second thing is going to be the discharge of the battery, okay? You cannot fully drain these batteries, okay? So if you run your gun until the battery completely dies on one of these batteries, that's it. You're done. The battery's done. You need a new battery, okay? You cannot run these LiPo batteries into the ground. So basically, you have to make sure that it does not run all the way empty, but also at the same time, when you start charging them, right, you're still eating away at the battery. So in a way, it's kind of like you're on limited time here. You're on a very borrowed lifespan with these batteries. Needless to say, the cells on these LiPo batteries are very fragile. And I'm gonna address the elephant in the room, all right, the puff. Okay, the LiPo batteries, they begin to puff after a while. And why does this happen? So a LiPo battery will start to puff if the gun ends up drawing more power than the LiPo battery can provide. If your gun is too power demanding and the LiPo battery can't keep up with it, well, your battery is going to start to puff, the cells will start to die, and again, your battery will eventually just stop working. It will just die. And for the love of God, I know it's very tempting because you see this like little air bubble in the back. Do not cut them. Do not puncture these batteries, whether they're puffy or not. These are extremely flammable, and I don't think that you can put this out with water because it's like a chemical fire. So please, for the love of God, do not, make sure to store these safely in LiPo safe bags. And please, for the love of God, do not cut these. The last thing that we're going to be talking about today about batteries are going to be connectors. So as you can see, if you were paying close attention to the batteries that I've been bringing up, you're going to realize there are two different connectors here on the airsoft market. Again, weird limbo space. I still don't know where we stand on the industry, whether what is industry standard and what's not. Just, I don't know why. But first of all, we have the green connector here, which is going to be the small type Tamiya connector. So this is a very basic connector. However, one of the biggest downside of these connectors is that the electrical contact points to where the battery and the gun meet is very small, and it does cause a bottleneck in your gun. So if you're going with the high performance build, or if you want your gun to maximize or optimize its performance, we would highly recommend rewiring your gun to Dean's instead of Tamiya, because you're going to get a lot of bottlenecking here, right here at the connector. And in some worst case scenarios, I've seen this happen. Okay, the connectors will melt together because there's so much heat resistance that happens between the gun and the battery. Okay, so it's almost a safety concern. So I would say eventually, if you're going the gun builder route, if you're gonna upgrade the hell out of your gun, first thing I recommend, other than getting a MOSFET and a better battery, is to change out these connectors. The second connector that you see a lot on the airsoft field are going to be Dean's connectors, or T-plugs as it's referenced to overseas. And a lot of airsoft manufacturers are trying to switch over to that type of connector because they realize, hey, we're making better quality airsoft guns. We need better quality connectors. And a lot of battery makers have done the same thing. So thank you. But a lot of times back in the early 2010s, this was something that you'd have to do on your own. You have to get a tech to rewire your battery and your gun for you. And thankfully nowadays, we don't really have to do that anymore. But why are Dean's connectors all the rage? Well, the first thing is, if you look closely, the electrical contact points here on the battery and the gun are way bigger. So the surface area to where electricity can flow between the battery and the gun have increased. And with that increase in surface area of electrical contact, you're gonna be able to output more power safely. And let's be real, Dean's connectors and Dean's plugs, okay, you know exactly where to connect it and how to disconnect it. Super pain-free, super easy. Again, let's make Dean's the standard. What's going on, people? Yep, so those are LiPo batteries. A lot of pros and a lot of cons with them. All right, you have to know what you're looking for, and you have to be pretty knowledgeable. But there's a new kid on the block. These are lithium ion batteries. Let's talk about them. Lithium ion batteries, okay? If that term sounds familiar to you, it's because those are the batteries that are in your phone, in your laptop, in your power bank, portable charger that you use to charge your phone, okay? They're pretty much universal, and with airsoft it is no exception. Okay, so brands such as Titan Power, okay, they've come and stormed the market because of how incredible their batteries have been for a lot of players. So the biggest benefit you'll get from running a lithium ion battery is going to be the amperage. My gosh, the amperage on these batteries, okay? This stick lithium ion battery holds 3,000 milliamp hours. That's the equivalent of three of these in this package, okay? And let's talk about this butterfly battery, 6,000 milliamp hours. Like, you could leave this plugged into your gun for like 6 months and your gun will still be running. Okay, so this thing has a lot of juice, especially amongst a lot of the more hardcore milsim players. I've noticed that they've gravitated toward these batteries just because they could leave it in their gun for a whole weekend straight and not have to worry about changing your batteries. And the second main benefit of running a lithium ion battery is going to be the great reduction in the charged cell memory effect. Okay, so you don't have to worry about these batteries draining juice or like draining its lifespan over a period of time. It's very negligible. It still happens on a scientific level, but for the end user, doesn't really matter or take into account. Okay, so you could drain these batteries all the way if you wanted to and recharge all the way. You can charge it halfway, whatever. You don't have to worry about the battery life being affected over time. With the benefits aside, what are some of the downsides of running a lithium ion battery? Well, number one, look at these things. They're huge. I know they do store a lot of juice, to be fair, but they're huge. So again, if you are more on the cosmetic side of the airsoft hobby, okay, if you like your guns looking cool, you're gonna be pretty limited on options on what kind of like stock or handguard attachments that you're gonna be looking for, because you have to accommodate these large honking batteries. In fact, a lot of the people that I know that run these batteries, they have to run an external battery pouch, which ugly, okay? So that's one of the biggest downfalls of running a lithium ion battery. Second of all, one thing of note with these lithium ion batteries is that they have a lower discharge rating than your lithium polymer batteries, okay? So they're going to output less juice at once. So you're not going to be able to get the same amount of rate of fire or trigger response out of these batteries as compared to a LiPo battery. Even though the discharge rating of these batteries are lower than the LiPo batteries, you're still going to need some type of MOSFET or electronic control system in your gun to handle the extra power delivery of these lithium ion batteries, specifically the 11.1 lithium ion batteries. We would strongly recommend that you make your gun the equivalent of LiPo ready to properly handle these batteries. Now, what if you just ignored everything I said for like the past 10 or so minutes and you just completely tuned me out, and now you're finally paying attention and be like, hey Boaz, what battery should I get for my gun? Okay, so does your gun have a MOSFET or electronic control system? No? Okay, well, get a 7.4 volt LiPo battery or the 7.4 lithium ion battery. Let's say your gun does have a MOSFET or electronic control unit and you don't really know what kind of motor or whatever or spring is in the gun. I would highly recommend getting either this 11.1 20C discharged LiPo battery or a 20 to 25C AK battery here. Now let's say you just don't know what's in your gun at all. You don't know if it has a MOSFET or not, or what kind of motor, what kind of parts. Then you know what? I don't care. Just try any of these batteries. I don't know. See what works. If your gun breaks, I don't know. Actually, no, don't do that. If you don't know what your gun has or you don't know what's going on, please make sure to reach us out on social media, either via Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. We'll be happy to answer your questions, or you can give us a call at our customer service line. We'll be happy to help and recommend the right battery for you. Thank you guys so much for checking out our guide on how to properly select a battery for your airsoft gun. Now, I know a lot of times it is very exciting for a lot of us to look at all these different new guns that are coming out and seeing like the performance of different people's airsoft guns, which is cool, but I personally believe that things like selecting the proper battery is often overlooked because, well, quite frankly, it's a little bit more boring. You know, you're not really looking at a gun, you're looking at batteries. But I personally believe that this is a very important thing that a lot of airsofters need to know, so that way you can properly maximize and correctly use your airsoft gun in the long run. And if you guys are looking into either acquiring more batteries for your guns, or whether you're buying your very first battery for your airsoft gun, please make sure to check out Airsoft GI. We have a ton of deals actually going on right now for different battery and charger packages. And if you guys like what you see, please make sure to hit subscribe and make sure to like the video, so that way we can keep the algorithm gods happy on YouTube. This is Boaz. I'll see you guys next time, Mail Gang.